Hello everyone, this is Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn & Wound. Welcome to episode 68 of A Week in Watches. We're gonna do a question and answer episode. We reached out to our WW Plus Slack community, got some excellent questions. But first, should we do a wrist check?
Let's do it.
All right, what do you got on?
I'm wearing an Omega Speedmaster in steel. Speedmaster Professional with the newer 3861 movement and that lovely tapered bracelet. Doesn't get a whole ton of action out of the box, but when I'm not reviewing anything, these are the kinds of watches that I like to reach. What about you? What are you rocking today? That looks unique.
Yeah. Funny, I should happen to have, so this is our most recent collab that we did with Boulder, the 3XT GMT. It was a particularly exciting watch, I think, for me because it was the first time we've been able to use the Miyota 9075 Flyer GMT movement, which I think is like a really big deal in the industry. It's bringing, Flyer or true GMT complication to, just making it available in general to third-party brands, because previously, pretty much any movement that was available to independent brands, except for maybe from Kanisi, which is at a higher price point and less available, had the typical collar GMT. Almost two totally different complications.
Really adds a layer of usefulness to the watch, obviously, and I think that's where the nicknames come from. Flyer versus the collar. So love seeing it brought into more accessible watches, particularly this.
Had a good time designing this. We added a third time zone using the kind of standard Zulu bezel so that you could, track a bunch of different time zones with ease.
All the time zones.
Yeah, my preference for travel is the Flyer style because, having to go entirely through, whatever.
Yeah, a quick adjustment of the hour hand is preferable there. So the design came out beautifully.
Thank you.
There's a lot of nice details in here. It's a watch that really kind of pulls you in for a closer look, and there's lots to discover there, so it came out lovely. And I think there's another colorway.
We call it blue, but it's really quite multicolored, and then a gray, which is a little bit more subdued, but has like tennis ball yellow accents on it, which were kind of fun, a little more 90s looking in style. I don't know what generation this one is. It's just fun. Kind of looks like crayons to me.
Yeah, it does.
Like I got a matte sort of waxy quality I like.
It's a fun watch, and I think maybe that could lead us in. We're looking at the questions that were submitted by our Worn & Wound Plus Slack community. Thank you if you're a person that submitted a question. We really appreciate it. There's lots of good ones in here. I don't know if we'll have time to get to all of them. Honestly, some of them could be their own podcast subject for a whole show. So keep an eye out for that. If you don't hear us talk about your question, we might get to it at a later episode in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, for sure.
But there is a question here from our friend Steve Faeo, who talks about us potentially getting jaded with the industry. And I think this watch is a kind of a great example. He says, I know Zach has gone into the weird side. I don't think he meant that in an insulting way. And Blake has been collecting neo vintage, but there are other tricks to it. So, I think this is kind of alluding to the fact that we see a lot of watches. We've been around a lot of watches for a long time now, and it's maybe an easy thing to get jaded by. And I think there are elements of that happen from time to time, but there are watches that we have, I think, that pull us out of that as we kind of crawl into our own areas of expertise, or not even areas of expertise, but things that we're curious about, that we're having fun, like just discovering and enjoying. And for me, that's kind of like really become a certain era of tool watches. I have a propensity for tool watches, so kind of discovering tool watches of a certain era from the mid to late 90s to early 2000s has been really fun, and I'm finding a lot of watches that have fallen through the cracks, I would say. They're very different from watches that we see today. So that's a way that I kind of keep myself still really excited about this stuff, because it's like something new to discover and learn about. And and I think when he says you are going into the weird side, it's like this
not a weird watch.
It's not a weird watch, but it's definitely kind of outside of the vein of like this safe, commercially viable watch. And I think these are, but there's something more there. There's something deeper there.
And certainly with my collection, and it vacillates too. So like just as quickly as I get weird, I feel pulled back the other direction to something more neo-traditional or classical or just like minimal. I think I got to a certain point where in a short span of time, I had the Bel Canto, the Alain Silberstein, Louis Erard, the Konstantin Chaikin Louis Erard, which was the weirdest of them all. I came back to like a Grand Seiko dress watch, and at this moment, actually, now I find myself wearing more like the dress watch, the Tudor Black by 54, which is, as kind of straight and sober of a dive watch as you can get. I mean, it's like classic kind of design. In terms of like, how do I avoid being jaded. It's funny. I think I get maybe a little jaded to the industry and to seeing news all the time because we are just, we see it constantly. We're seeing stuff that comes out in months and even years in advance at times. There's only so many new discoveries aesthetically, so people did like the mid-century thing. I think we really explored the aesthetic of vintage watches and how they could translate into modern watches and people are still doing that and there's nothing wrong with it. But I feel a little less excitement now than I did a few years ago when I see a 36 millimeter, vintage style watch. Not because it's not beautiful, but because I've seen it so many times. And then you got to dig into the details of the brand of the watch to find, I don't know, what's special or why, frankly, that excitement again. So it's like the top layer is where I'm jaded, but you dig, and then there's still a lot of excitement to be had.
There's still plenty of fun things there and exciting things. And you mentioned it leading into another question about trends. Aloha J, we've seen a lot of trends, and he references the kind of, Fotina, bronze cases, green dials, big cases, small cases, all that kind of stuff. And I asked us about design trends for watches in 2024. And I think just in general, I think we've seen a slight shift in sentiment towards, I think there's some beautiful watches that have been reissued and modern interpretation of older watches. And I think, you get into the Fotina type stuff and it's evolved even past that. Where they're really reinterpreting some of the older designs. So I think we'll still continue to see that, but I think they won't be as nailed to the original design as they maybe once were 5, 6, 7 years ago, where it was important that it even looked like it was an old watch. Now I think they're taking some design inspiration from the heritage models, but they're doing it in a way that feels like it could have been released now or in a slightly more modern way. But I definitely can sense a shift away from that kind of a thing, broadly speaking.
Yeah, because it's no longer just like enough or like a brand message unto itself. To do these different things. And I think we've also just seen so much experimentalism in, what you were listed before, right? We've seen the Fotina watches. We've seen the bronze watches and, I don't know, a million other different little things. And
they're great.
We've even seen the scaling down of watches as a trend, and now, well, it's funny. It's actually almost a little counter what you said, but like Nevada Grenshin with the 35 millimeter Antarctic, which to me, it's like, so we've gotten to a point where they can just be like, we're just going to release it exactly as it was.
And that feels like an old watch in the hand. It really does.
And you can't get more neo-vintage than that. So you want the vintage experience now, you don't even have to get an interpretation.
Yeah.
Or you can find, where people are going. Pure discovery, a little bit of finding their brand's own voices and how those differ entirely from the sort of, codes of the past. I think an example of that actually is even the new Baltic Hermetique a bit. That has a sort of vintagey feeling, which fits with the brand, but unless I'm missing something, I don't think there's really a reference you can point to with it. So it feels like, they're finding an independent language there. And then the other side of it is this sort of push we're seeing towards some interesting complications in manufacturing from brands that I think historically in the past weren't able to do that.
And I think that leads us into maybe one of the other questions here that kind of asks about one of the more impactful watches that have been released. And I think this is a part of that. And I think you and I would maybe both answer that with the same watch, the Christopher Ward Bel Canto,
100%.
which we have seen have effects and start to have deeper effects into other, not just the small brand space, but I think the broader span, even high-end independents, household name brands, you name it. I think that watch in particular showed we can still really be creative and do something different, maybe incorporate an unexpected complication, and we can still do it at the Christopher Ward price point. And I think that watch came together really well, and the attention that it got from enthusiasts of all stripes, collectors of all stripes, caused a lot of brands to take notice. And really, hopefully we'll see them kind of respond in a way that upping their creativity game, thinking about ways that they can utilize different complications for, in different ways. So, but it really took their approach to it. And of course, this is a complication that has existed, and even the Meistersinger Bellora we were talking about the other day, that was there before the Bel Canto, but the Bel Canto really kind of, I think, transcended into another realm, and it really got people that are into an aesthetic that's maybe a little more conceptual in nature, that just kind of looks and feels like it's of the same vein as like a high-end independent. So to see that kind of done at a scale and price point of Christopher Ward, I think was a game-changing moment.
There's almost this like sense you sometimes get from the larger luxury brands or from the Swiss industry in general that like it's sort of impossible to do these things. Like no one can make a whatever at under $10,000-$15,000. So why even try?
Yeah.
So it takes, a disruptor, to use a cliched term, like Christopher Ward, to do it and show it. And then they set a bar, they set a standard, and now these brands are just looking at them and hopefully being like, well, shoot, now we don't have an excuse anymore on the big side of things, And then I think from brands that are up and coming or younger independent brands, maybe they're more established, they have more, money to invest into research and development, which is really the big hurdle there, are seeing that, look, I can get up to the $3,500, $4,000 price point if I do something that is outside of the box.
Yeah.
Because there is a market for it,
Yeah, and I feel like it's been leading up to that for a while. Because in like things like materials, or maybe things that are like slightly less obvious, that at one point we're kind of locked into the exotic range that we've seen more and more trickle into our space. So you can get really cool creative watches from the likes of, Formex and Boulder and whatever, using some of these materials that had been kind of locked away in that other space. So the Bel Canto was kind of a culmination of that, I felt like, the kind of overport. And I know a lot of brands have asked us about it and taken notice of that. So hopefully that will lead to kind of a new generation of how some brands think about their products.
Unfortunately, we can't talk about everything we see, but something that came out last year, which was really cool, was the Space One, which was from Guillaume Ledet, who's also kind of the creative force behind Nevada Grenchen and Enicar and a few of the brands, and Vulcane, a few of those brands that are in this one group.
Yeah.
And then an high-end independent watchmaker, Theo Offray, teaming up to develop a jump hour complication built off a Miyota with a very high fancy case, forged carbon, also blued titanium. And then, what are those? Those were $2,000 to $3,000, maybe even a little less. But, I know that they have big aspirations for what they're doing there. And it's in this vein of like, well, we have the tools, let's use them.
Absolutely. That stuff and some watches that, as you mentioned, we can't talk about quite yet, really have me excited.
It really sucks not being able to talk about some of this stuff. There's a hypothesis here. We have reasons.
Yeah, we have reasons. And that was Nathan Schultz, by the way. Thank you for that question. So I'm going to move over to a question from 060, who asks about movement accuracy versus design aesthetics and functionality. What do you place more importance on when purchasing a watch, and why? I think we see a lot of watches that go way up the price range, and it's because of how the movement is constructed, finished, designed, engineered by hand. All that, like a lot of the value at the high end really comes from that component. So I think everyone has their, why I like that it's aesthetically beautiful to me. Does it matter if it is highly accurate, or does it just have to be something that's aesthetically beautiful? Maybe we both fall on the same side of this. I think, if you're that concerned with high accuracy, you're probably not living in this world anyways. But of course, there are really impressive, highly accurate watches, highly accurate and precise watches. That are being made, from the likes of Grand Seiko and others. I don't know where you personally fall on it.
Well, when it comes to like my actual shopping, I'm not really an accuracy hunter per se. Like that's not the first thing I look for. But it's one of those things. If it's there, if it's a part of the package of the watch, then I certainly like it. So like, I love the fact that the spring drive movements are far more accurate than a standard mechanical movement. Yeah. And I love that the 9F is, magnitudes more accurate even than that, so to me, it's a feature of those watches.
Yeah.
Would I have bought those watches if they had the standard accuracy of a normal mechanical movement, even a non-chronometer? Probably, because I'm really getting them because of how I like the way they look.
Yeah.
What I think though is really cool on the high end is where brands can figure out how to do both, which is, I feel like, like you said, you see brands veer into finishing as the story and the craft, and they stop talking a little bit about the accuracy at a certain point, and you stop asking too, right?
Yeah.
But like a brand like Ferdinand Berthaud does it both, and I've seen they recently they got chronometer level certification on these incredibly wild, kind of complex but classically inspired watches.
Yeah.
Which I think speaks towards, their goal as a brand,
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
And then they're celebrating these engineering techniques that were developed, quite a number of years ago, obviously, and doing them to an exceptional degree. Things like Fusi and Chain, or Remonsoirs. And you see some of this stuff incorporated that is all done in service of maintaining a certain level of accuracy. But yeah, I doubt that's the one thing that's pushing people over.
No, when
the
you're
fence,
at that,
on these things, it's
you gotta love the package and the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I certainly, I think if you were to buy a watch and it's absolutely beautifully made, but it's 5 minutes off a day, and it's kind of like, well, that's what you get for having a solid gold movement or something. You'd probably be like, well, shoot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that there's a level of for me, it just needs to be accurate enough.
Yeah, exactly.
To where I'm not like totally.
I don't want to be fiddling with it.
Yeah,
constantly.
In fact, I generally prefer closed case backs. I think this is the Hesalite. So it has the closed case back. The movement is nice looking. I suppose.
So you would go for a stealth one?
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I think I prefer a closed case back up to that level.
Right.
Probably.
Up to that
Once
point.
I get up into those kind of watches, then I think it becomes about something else, and that's a part of the experience of a watch, like a Lange or an Aperture, or many others kind of up in that realm. And I certainly appreciate that. Those generally are the watches that I kind of wear day to day, though, and in my like tool watch from Omega or Tudor or something, I don't need to see the movement, so the aesthetics of it don't really matter to me.
But that almost speaks back to a little bit of the jaded element of it.
Absolutely.
I think when you first get into this, it's so exciting. I mean, the Seiko 5s I got for $60, the little SNK tool watches, had open case backs for a completely unfinished movement, and times were almost like if you looked at them with a loop, they were dirty, but it was so cool to have it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think you're absolutely right. And it's just like at the phase that I'm at now, I don't need to see the movement unless it's up there into like really exceptional territory. Just because that's not the kind of thing that I generally find appealing to me. But I think it's a good question, and I think that's going to be probably a little bit different for everybody. And like I said, it's as long as it's accurate enough. And I have very accurate watches, but I think the thing about what guys like you and I do is that we're wearing a lot of different watches. So I'm rarely in a scenario where I'll go like a week or even a few days where I'm wearing the same watch. And generally, so if I put a watch on like this morning, I wind it, set it, and I know it's going to be bang on for the day. I'm probably not going to wear it tomorrow.
Nobody's worried about the day.
Yeah, so it's all I care about is that like, okay, can I get 18 hours of like the relative accuracy out of this? Yes. And every time I check, this is a exceedingly accurate watch. The changes that they've made to this, it's always bang on.
It's a master chronometer, right?
It's a master chronometer. Yeah. So and there are other Tudor watches that have that are very accurate.
Yeah. I like when brands pursue it. I think that the pursuit of accuracy is an admirable one, especially like if you have a chance, if you're looking for a little reading over the break, pick up Longitude by Dana Sobel.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book about basically the first chronometers by Thomas Harrison, if I'm getting that right, but also like the kind of race between astrology and horology to create something for navigation purposes. And getting to a chronometer standard was the most incredible high-tech thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
And we're so past that now, but it's still like that is an original pursuit of in the world of horology, right?
Yeah, horology and astronomy like coming together in a way that really had a distinct purpose for navigating.
And we take it so for granted.
And now it's just completely...
I mean, a quartz watch, if you dropped a quartz watch back then, it would blow the minds of the navigators in the sea, because it was impossibly more accurate than these things that were giant Anyway, I love to think about that. And then we were just yesterday, we visited a press preview of this Omega event, and they had the Speedmaster with the spirate adjuster, which gets it to 0 to +2 seconds a day, theoretically, of accuracy, which is a magnitude beyond chronometer, even master chronometer.
Yeah,
and that stuff is cool. That's very cool.
It's really exceptional, and to take a moment to even just think about a watch like this being that accurate is quite remarkable, honestly. And when you start thinking about it on that level, then all right, seeing the movement and seeing that at work, like okay, it's something to appreciate, and seeing that it's still entirely mechanical.
Yeah.
So Mark Levesque asks us how our working relationship came about. We've both been working in this industry for a long time, and of course have crossed paths for many years before we started working together at Warner or before I started working for you at Warner. I should say I was with a site called StockX for a while, and I got them into the wind-up watch fairs.
Yeah.
So I started being a part of the watch fairs as a member of the StockX team there. telling people about StockX, and I was mostly there just nerd out about watches with a lot of the people, and I think that's that's probably how I got to know you maybe a little bit deeper, other than just kind of seeing you in passing.
Yeah, you were with Hodinkee, and then you did some other things, and then you got into StockX. I feel like that's where we sort of reconnected. But I do remember also the first time we met, which was on a press trip with Hamilton to the Oshkosh Aviation Fair,
My
which
backyard.
was one of my first press trips. It might have been the first press trip outside of like a New York State. It was quite the crew there. It was us and Ariel Adams and Mark Bernardo and maybe a couple other people even.
Yeah, some of the OGs this is a small world, so we all know each other pretty
sorry
well.
for just name dropping.
But these are like if you read a lot of publications, it's you'll notice a lot of the same names, and we're all friendly with each other, and we see each other quite often on these things, and we do our best to support each other, of course.
And have beers together when we're at these weird little events together.
This was great because it gave me an opportunity to introduce all of you to something called Firepower, which is a beer from New Glarus Brewery in Wisconsin. You can only get in Wisconsin. That is pretty good. I try not to overhype it because it's not like magic or anything, but it's pretty good. That's kind of how we've crossed paths for many years. So it all worked out really well for me to come to New York here and work for Worn and Wound. So thanks again to everybody who wrote in their questions on the Worn and Wound Plus Slack. If you are not a member and you have questions of your own for us, you can become a member by signing up for our email, and you will get access to it for free. So if you had other birding questions that you would like for us and you don't feel like doing that, that's fine. You can just leave them in the comments below. We'll do our best to get to those as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And if you enjoy this content, please be sure to leave a like, share. It really helps us out a lot. And until next time, take care.